Welcome to Com 400. We're looking at public relations research, and like advertising, PR has become more research oriented recently. PR research provides the initial information necessary to plan public relations action. It's information also to evaluate effectiveness. So you can have a pre-test to see what needs to be done, and a post-test to see if that campaign worked, that public relations campaign worked. Today, management, however, demands accountability more than guesswork and intuition. And so there's definitely a push toward accountability. They're looking for hard facts and not intuition and guesswork. Now, there are three kinds of public relations research. There's applied research, basic research, and introspective research. Very different kinds of research. And we're going to take a look at each one of those more carefully. Let's look at applied research first. It examines a specific private issue or specific private issues. And very often that is something people hire somebody to do. They say, we want to find out what people think about our, maybe it's OSF or someplace, and they say, we want to find out what people think about how we're handling the crisis, the pandemic. And so they might ask people, and that's specific. It's not trying to get any information on the on a theory. So it is it's applied research. We talked a little bit about that. We've talked about that before. Introspective research examines the field of public relations. It examines things such as PR values, maybe ethics. Is it ethical to do this? What's the ethical approach for things? And very often those end up in a journal, like Public Relations Review is one academic journal, and Public Relations Research as well. And so Lang and Lang did a lot of research in that area, and so usually people cite them when they're talking about research ethics in regard to public relations. The last is basic research, and it creates knowledge that cuts across the discipline. It's creating that theoretical knowledge. It looks at theories and processes. So this would be looking at does the two-step flow theory work with Snapchat? Is that part of the two-step flow process or flow of opinion, etc.? Okay, now let's switch gears a little bit to look at kinds of applied PR research. We talked about that at the beginning. You have, or at the first of those three kinds of research, kinds of applied research. The first is strategic research. This is used to develop public relations campaigns and programs. So you would find out what people are thinking about a subject, maybe what somebody is or people are thinking in general about your organization. You may go in and try to find out, get a baseline of research to find out what opinion is. Do you really need a big campaign to change opinion? One of the recent campaigns that were done in central Illinois is the Unity, the creation of the Unity clinics and things like that. And the ad campaign came out 2 or 3 years ago. The point of Unity is you, and it was kind of a repackaging of some other things. But they wanted to get the idea that it was personalized, and they did actually focus on that. They had the doctors do different things that would tend toward personalization, and they did surveys and constant surveys, and that would be strategic research. And sometimes it's a matter of keeping in touch with your customers. You want to do better with them, and that's why PR very often is it's very helpful. It's very helpful to the consumers often. You have a few bad PR people out there. Usually they are in politics, but mostly PR is generally quite benign. The second kind of research is applied research, is evaluation research. That's conducted to assess the effectiveness of a campaign. So you ran a campaign. Afterwards, you want to find out whether it changed people's opinions, whether people have a better opinion or at least a different opinion than they did at the beginning. The third thing is environmental monitoring. It is used to observe trends in public opinion and social events that may have a significant impact on an organization. So that is looking at different trends, things that could affect, for instance, we were talking about healthcare. So people might be looking at what is going to affect healthcare. And right now, people actually probably aren't doing that. I think at this point, the CEOs of healthcare organizations are just trying to keep the wheels on the bus at this time. So they're probably not working on it. Sometimes I see a few things where they could use some research to really present the truth in a more accurate way than they're doing. Sometimes they're not helping themselves in the way they communicate their information. Let's go to environmental monitoring. Was the third thing. It is used to observe trends in public. Oh, I just said that, trends in public. Sorry, I was about to jump into the next thing, and I looked at the next thing in the notes. One thing I wanted to say about environmental monitoring is that when we think of the environment, we think about spotted owls and the outdoors. That's actually not what this means. Environmental monitoring here means just the environment around you. I used to be a reporter, and I worked in PR later, but while I was working as a reporter, I was friends with a gentleman who, his name was Steve Weinstock, and I used to work with him, and he was a great public relations professional that worked for a local hospital that was going in through some controversial things. It was a public hospital. People were protesting about it. They weren't really doing what you would say would normally be controversial, but one of the things was they wanted a helicopter, and people said we don't need one, and that caused some controversy. So people would come, and sometimes they would protest, and he would always be there, just kind of watching and talking to them. If people had questions, he was willing to talk to them. Very nice, truthful person. And that's a kind of environmental monitoring. And a lot of that goes on in public relations. It's your eyes and ears of what's happening. Now, there are two phases of environmental research. The first is the early warning phase, and this identifies emerging issues. It's looking and saying, what's on the horizon? There will be a lot of this in about a year, trying to figure out what the future holds for different businesses, because everything's changed a little bit. And so people will be saying, here are probably going to be the trends for the future. So this may take the form of analyzing documents. Those documents could be online. It could be everything from news will usually be the first one. They might look at what conferences, professional conferences, what kinds of papers are being presented, which could affect academic and professional, future in academic and professional circles. And so documents may be one of the things that you look for. When I was in public relations, we used, there was LexisNexis. There is a form of that, not what we have at Bradley, but we have the academic form. But there's another form where you can get very many different kinds of documents. You could get, at one time you could get every newspaper, just about any place in the United States, and you could run your brand through, and it would tell you if anybody had mentioned your brand. So when I worked for the University of Missouri system, public relations or university relations, we would try to see if anybody had written anything about University University of Missouri and in the state, and if they had, maybe we would get somebody to respond to that. One of our, sometimes it was the president or the chancellor who would write an op-ed saying, I saw that you had a question about this. Here's what we were doing. Here's what we were trying to do. Maybe we made some mistakes. Maybe we didn't. To clarify that and to let people know that we were being open. So that is the form of analyzing documents. It also may use a SWOT analysis. If you've had, let's see, Nancy, you have had business classes, and SWOT analysis is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that's a basic way you analyze a business. And so you may do some of those and use, I just knocked the table, sorry about that. It looked like an earthquake. But you may do that to get information on what's going to be happening in the future. A number of years ago, there was a book called Megatrends that was written, and it was a bestseller, New York Times bestseller, about 30 years ago. And everybody was shocked because it said the whole world order was going to change. It said people were going to be focused on information, and the amount of information we had would double every year. It actually doubles now every at least 6 months, maybe faster than that. And so everybody was very shocked about this. And the author who had done this had done the same thing as we're talking about here. He looked at different trends and said, this is where we're going. He emphasized a high service industry, that service industries would be much larger, and also that information would be the big industry of the future. He was entirely right. And so that was I remember people thinking, so this can't be right, and looking and saying, well, the trends do seem to be there. So that is early warning phase monitoring. Now, there are two kinds. Do I have enough time to do this? I am just going to stop here, actually, and we will continue this on the next video. We will look at two kinds of early warning phase studies. I'll see you then.